Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to today's live stream. Inshallah, today I have with me Brother Mu'tasim, who will be discussing with me how to society's role in education and how the pros and cons of the current education system, and also looking at the systems that are put in place for SEN education, and also how we can, are there any areas of development, and he'll also be talking from his own experience. Brother Mu'tasim he has been in the education sector for over 10 years now, and he's doing his teacher training, has worked extensively with SEN students and in SEN provision schools as well. He's also studied at Ibrahim College, and he's also he's fluent in Arabic, and he's currently pursuing a law degree. So, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mu'tasim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you today?
Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair.
Okay, so we'll get started with the first question, inshallah. So as somebody who's obviously been in the education sector for over 10 years now, what's your experience been like generally in the education sector? You've worked at primary schools, secondary schools. What's your, experience been like?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. First of all, to Brother Maheer, for welcoming me, jazakallah khair, for welcoming me to your podcast to discuss this important subject as to what is society's role in education. In terms of the experience, obviously it varies. So it depends obviously on the school and how, the school's system, the school's rules and procedures. Overall, it's been, I can only say it's been amazing. It's been interesting. And you get to learn a great deal about yourself whilst you're in that environment. And obviously you get to learn how to overcome any challenges or predicaments that, that may arise unexpectedly.
So as in what, so could you just briefly tell us which places you've worked at and any stories from those places that you might want to put forward?
I'll start with the SEN provision, since that's often I've worked with few severe to mild to moderate. There were certain times, for example, I worked with a year 1 student. He's in year 1, obviously. He had, I believe he had ADHD, and obviously he was always hyperactive. But what happened was with this individual, he was in, obviously, as I said, it's in year 1. I think he's now in year, maybe a 4, maybe a 5. So obviously he presented challenging behavior. So obviously, in order to work around it, there were certain ways, obviously, I had to deal with. So one of the ways was putting rules into place. So for example, you say, okay, if his name was, for example, Charlie, all right, Charlie, this was going to happen. Okay, so for example, first warning, second warning, if there's a third warning or reminder, then we're going to go to seclusion or isolation room. That allows him to just get a breather, just calm himself down, and just to talk. Okay, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Sometimes what used to happen at times was he was tired. And because he was tired, he wasn't sure how to express himself, or, he felt that he couldn't express himself. So, okay, come on, let's go. And just take him to the seclusion room. He just needed a little bit of that rest for 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And then everything was okay. Another situation was SEMH. So he was in year 2. This one was slightly more, I wouldn't say difficult, but I could say heartbreaking, because the situation was that he was put under the care of a guardian or of a relative, because, unfortunately, the parents weren't, capable. They weren't able to look after him. He wasn't severe, maybe, for example, compared to another ADHD student. Again, just few warnings and options. Do you want to make the right option? If you make the right option, this is what happens. If you make the wrong option, that's what happens. So always giving them a way out. And obviously, when we do say SEN, we're always under the impression that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, I think
in reality, yes. In reality, that's not what it is. Yes, it stands for special education needs. Okay, I get it.
It's a negative stigma around, isn't it?
Unfortunately.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is. The reality is, just like you and I and everyone else, just like we all require assistance, guidance, advice, and encouragement in order for us to unlock our potential and realize our potential, it's the same. Obviously, and it also in terms of learning, everyone learns differently. You learn in a one way. For example, you could learn, with visually, so you have to see that particular thing. Sometimes you may have to write down that certain or particular instruction or whatever it may be, in order for you to understand, okay, this is how you do it. And that's exactly what it is. Yes. Now, we did obviously mention that I worked in severe, when I say severe, meaning in SEND provisions. Now, with that, it's obviously it's a different, when I say it's a different arena, it is still SEND, but they require further assistance. So, for example, they're in year 9, so they're 14 years old, but in terms of the education, they have a lot of catching up to do. That's what it is.
Can I bring you back to when you mentioned your first story about the ADHD student? How, for example, when I was in primary school, obviously I went to a secondary school that was private and it was very small, so we didn't really have any students at SEN. But when I was at primary school, I was actually at 4 different primary schools. So, when I was there and there was like SEN students, we didn't really interact with them much, and they were just there on the side and things like that. How can we spot what can we do? What sort of behavior should we look out for to maybe see if someone is a student like that, and how should we maybe as students, what should we do?
So sometimes, with SEN, sometimes it's not detectable. It's not as pellucid. So, for example, sometimes hidden. For example, anxiety, severe anxiety. In one way, for example, when I was in a secondary school, there was this one particular student. She was at the time, I think, in year 9, and now she's in year 11 or year 10. She had ADHD, and she was highly anxious. So, for example, if you see this particular individual, for this example, you see that she's always answering back to the teacher. She gets angry. Like there's a great deal inside of them, and when they express their emotions, they do it in a way where it's not intentional. They didn't intentionally, they didn't mean to, express the emotion in that way. Sometimes you have to, one instruction, right, you need to stop doing that. Please don't do that. Okay, you need to come and sit down. Okay, right. Michael, please face the front. And he's turning back every 2 minutes. Michael, spin around. Michael, spin around. Sometimes it's rebellious behavior, and at times it could be, sometimes it could be SEN. Obviously, dyslexia is obviously it's something obviously common. I'm sure, I'm sure you've noticed some with, if when you were in school. Obviously, sometimes you may have to repeat one instruction, or it takes them time to process that. So if I say to you, okay, Maheer, this is what the task is. So you didn't understand it once, so I may have to break it down in various ways, as an example. So that could be a potential for, okay, Maheer, you may be under the what they call the SEN radar. So they're just seeing if anything, or if it's just that particular, concern or
So
area of issue.
what is the, I mean, you're briefly touching on that, but what is the current sort of system that is in place to help? And obviously there's like a broad, different types of students. We have different types of, special needs, but if just generally you can say like what type of, support systems are put in place to help these students so that they can also, access the learning properly and they're not put in a disadvantaged position.
Okay, so for example, let's say you have in let's say primary school. Okay, and then I'll touch up on the secondary side also with even whether it's primary or secondary. To be honest, I'll just clear this. They always have an LSA, so learning support assistant. So the role of a learning support assistant or an LSA is to work one-to-one with the SEN child. Okay, so what that could mean is, so they will get certain, I wouldn't say certain advantages, but there are certain certain factors put into place to to help them. So for example, they might get 10 minutes break, they might get 15 minutes break, they might sometimes okay, for example, if it's in primary school, okay, Jimmy, you've done really good work, do you wanna take a walk? Sometimes they have passes. So for example, in secondary education, they might have passes. I need is to say, okay, if the child feels overwhelmed, it's in secondary and primary. If the child feels overwhelmed, then they obviously produce, in secondary school, they will produce this card, and it says, Elena Smith, has permission to step outside just to take a breather. So when you do go outside, and you can say, okay, they just calm down. Sometimes they can request it. Sometimes they request it. Obviously, we do get to look at their background. We do look at their profile as to what their requirements are, what assistance do they need help in, and obviously it's likes, dislikes, what they can do with the areas of development, so on and so forth.
What about in secondary then? How is it? Because I know in secondary, I don't think they get one-to-one support. You know how like in primary schools,
yes.
Obviously when I was at primary schools, we would see that a lot of the times with students who have maybe SEN, somebody sits with them in class, someone extra, and is helping them and going through with them. But in secondary schools, obviously I went to private school, so I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but is it similar, or do they get one-to-one support like that in class? How does it work?
So are you, when you say, obviously, is it, you went to is it an Islamic secondary school you went to, or?
Yeah.
So you see, because of the funding, because of the budget,
yeah, they don't really get.
Yeah, you see, that's the, I wouldn't say that's the downfall, but that's one of the predicaments. For example, in secondary school, they may get a laptop, for example. They may get an iPad. Sometimes what could also happen is, okay, they may get similar, different work. So it's something that could, but it doesn't mean, it's not that they're doing, so let's just say the student is in year 9. For example, they're doing, I don't know, an inspector calls. I'm just giving an example. They're doing an inspector calls. If they're not getting a different, work, or they're not doing anything different. They're doing the same inspector calls. It's just perhaps something that I'm not going to say easier, but something that the child can do. So it's not difficult, it's not overwhelming. Something that so if there's, for example, maybe it may be less questions. So instead of 10 questions, maybe 5 questions. So obviously,
How exactly does so obviously I understand the less work to be able to help them to learn it, I guess, on the same level as everyone else. But how does the, I'm a bit curious myself, how does giving them a laptop or an iPad, how does that help with them?
so for example, sometimes what could happen is it takes them perhaps a little bit time to write. So for example, they might find it difficult to write, so they just type it instead. The other method is the LSA, so the learning support assistant, whomsoever that may be, will write for them and they'll copy, because obviously it could be, they could find it a challenge that the teacher's going too fast and they're not able to catch up. So that's also been provided. And obviously in primary school also at times, sometimes laptops are provided. When I said not laptops, sorry, my apologies, iPads. And that obviously, because he's in primary school, it kind of makes it a little bit more easier and it makes it a little bit more fun, and enjoyable.
So what about, obviously, so we looked at primary school and so what about for institutes like even maktabs and things, like how can we better equip them to deal with or do they have any systems in place and stuff? Just briefly, obviously, because this is not where our main focus, but just briefly, what sort of systems, if you have worked in maktab, let's say, what sort of systems do they have in place?
Maktabs have a very long way to go, to be honest. Some maktabs, they do have, for example, like the Promethean interactive whiteboards. Some maktabs obviously do have that in place, but it's very rare. Not all makatib do have this. But one of the ways to, for example, yes, and budget, obviously we have to take into consideration that there is a budget that they all have to take into consideration. And I say this with all the respect possible, that a person with, how they say, a fool with a plan can outsmart an intelligent person or a genius without a plan. So a person who's experienced. So for example, you have a person, he's not a Maulana, he's not a Hafiz, but he has the experience of working in primary school, in secondary school, okay? And he's observed, he's seen, he's taught, he has experience, he has an understanding, he knows how to deal with that. Now, one thing would be a huge advantage, of course, is a person who's Hafiz and he's alim, for example, he's a Maulana, and he had experience in the teaching industry. That would be huge advantage. And when I say teaching industry, I don't mean in Islamic schools. I mean actually in a state school.
Okay.
And he does few roles. And then obviously what he can do is he can implement, and let's just say he does maktab 5 to 7 as an example. That is a stepping stone. That is one step closer. That's one. And yes, I understand you may have to pay them a little bit higher, but you can work towards that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Like, me, when I'm teaching at Mimbar, or before when I was teaching privately, house to house, there was a level of there's a certain way of how I used to teach. And then once I started going to college, alhamdulillah, the college I go to, the teachers are, they're quite they graduated from like Oxford, Cambridge, those types of universities. So the level of teaching they have and their style is quite different, and they produce what they need to do, right? they produce good results. And so I started implementing some of the ways they teach into also, in the classes that I do and the maktab teaching that I do. And I've seen that that way is much better than how I used to do before. So I get your point about how you want to, supplement that the state school teaching and the training you have from teaching there into maktabs. It does really help and produces a much better and higher quality of teaching. So moving on to the next question. So regarding the approach that the schools take towards helping SEN students, are there any areas of development with any of these strategies that they use? Because obviously you've said some of them and some of their pros, but what do you think some of the areas of development might be?
So you see, I was at a school previously, so I think before the Christmas holidays. What would obviously help is, of course, the more staff you have, the better it is. And obviously, qualified staff obviously do help with experience. So the person has a qualification, awesome, that's very good. Experience. So if you have both, no problem. Also, obviously, I've been to obviously SEN provisions, and obviously they get their budget is obviously far more, because their budget is specifically for that school. Like, for example, that's that SEN school, and obviously sometimes what happens is one LSA or one learning support assistant is working with 3 different students. That sometimes can be overwhelming. And sometimes, like when I mentioned to you the year 2 student who had SEMH. So one of the tasks of the school was, one of the objectives was for the school was that they wanted him to be independent again. So what I used to do was I used to say to him, okay, right, Michael, let's do this. Okay, let's do one question together. Okay, and then I want you to do 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, okay. So then I used to leave him. I said, okay, this is the task, so you know what to do. Yes, Michael, perfect. I'm gonna go and see how everyone else is doing. Okay, well, I'll come back to you and we'll see how you're getting on. Is that okay, Michael? Yes, perfect. Like, for example, reassurance. We have to always, with anyone, whether it's SEN, non-SEN, to give reassuring someone, a child, especially a child, or secondary, it's vital. It has to be done, and that way they feel more comfortable. They feel
supported as well.
Supported.
And I think they're more comfortable to do that work. Like they won't feel, that I have to get it right, and that makes them, stress more about getting it. If they feel like, the teacher's gonna come back and check on me, he knows I'm struggling, or she knows I'm struggling, it's much better. Yeah, see, where you're coming from. That. Are there any other areas of development? Obviously, you mentioned that getting more teachers in, but with the current education budget and the school budgets going down a lot, what other strategies with what they have, how can they maybe change it?
Sometimes what schools do is they take more than they can handle. So I was and sometimes parents are responsible to a certain extent. For example, I worked with a SEN child. He was non-verbal. So he was non-verbal. He's in a mainstream school. It's, of course, yes, you're getting a budget for that child, but and he's also working one-to-one, okay, or he has a one-to-one support. What schools sometimes what they just need to do is just say, look, it's preferable if he's in an SEN setting where he will get 100% attention. And when I say 100% attention, every single one of these requirements will be met, because they have people who are experienced, teachers who are experienced in helping non-verbal students or children. For example, they'll have a book and it's like, okay, where do you want to go? So the child will point, okay, toilet, lunch, in a form of encouragement. And also the teachers there, the staff there, they are far more qualified and trained in that compared to a normal secondary school or a primary school teacher, where I'm not saying they don't have any qualifications, but they don't have the certain qualifications, the requirements, or the training to be able to deal or take care of that particular student.
So do you think the provisions that the education sector is giving to SEN students now is good enough, or is it like, you know how I said with maktabs, they're very far off, you know, with respect, obviously, they're quite far off from providing the necessary education to SEN students and the necessary help. Do you think that, you know, public sector education is at a good level, or has a long way to come, or, you know, where do you stand on that? What do you think of that?
I mean, obviously, you know, everyone has areas of development, and I think they are working towards that. It's just obviously, you know, because of the pandemic and since the pandemic, budgets have been very tight, so they kind of stuck. So what they're trying to they are forced to reduce staff, and that kind of not kind of, but that in a way does present a predicament. In terms of, obviously, as we said, what they can do is, even if it is a one-to-one staff, even if they have reduced staff, give staff as much support as possible, because it's the same procedure. If the member of staff that's working with one-to-one with that student or with that child who does have SEN, and they feel that, you know what, I have the support, I have everything that I need, it will become much more easier for the staff to deal with, you know, or to, okay, you know what, I have the backing of my seniors, they'll help me, you know, and obviously report writing. Obviously, you do have to write a report writing. Whether that's going to, I don't know, whether there is an area of improvement there or area of development there. That's obviously we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, always ensuring that motivation and encouragement is provided to the teacher, to the classroom teacher, to the support staff, and of course to the child.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. So inshallah, we'll get started right away again. So the next question I have for you, Brother Mu'tasim, is that, you know, you were talking about, you know, how one potential strategy might be to increase the numbers of staff who are able to help SEN students. You know how you're talking about the one-to-one support they give. So you were saying about increasing the support. I was just thinking, do you think that there's been an increase in the number of SEN students, or has there been a decrease in that?
Sometimes, obviously, what happens is that due to the school's budget, and obviously we did mention that due to the school's budget, sometimes they can't always facilitate that. So, for example, they'll have SEN students, but they will not be, due to the budget, cap. They will not be able to, for example, have instead of having 5, they might have 2. So they will not be able to hire as much staff as they would wish to. So obviously, in this sort of environment, in regards to this case, and obviously it also depends on how severe, or as I said, how severe, but the requirements are for the child. So what that child needs, can the child work independently for a short period of time if you leave the child alone? If you give that child a task, can that child do that task without once the task has been explained? Or does the child need further assistance? Does the child need consistent assistance? Does someone have to be there consistently to assure that the child has a comprehension of the task? That's for example, that could be one. I'm just giving an example. That could be one aspect the school may look at, and based on that, it's like, okay, you know what, the child seems to be okay. He can do the work, or she can do the work, independently for a certain amount of time. And for example, if there's 3 other SEN or 4 other SEN students, okay, let's see how the other 3 are doing. Now, there was one other thing I was going to mention quickly is, I'm not sure if you used to notice this in school, in primary or secondary. If there's, for example, 5 SEN students in the class, okay, did you ever notice that there would be one LSA and he would be supporting?
Yes.
So
I used to sit next to a student who had SEN, and he had a teacher next to him helping her as well. So yeah, I do remember that.
So sometimes they do this. So what they will do in primary and sometimes obviously in secondary school is they will have, for example, one strategy would be, as I give you the example, where they'll have, let's just say there was 5 students. So all of the 5 students will be in on one table, and the teacher would be there. The other thing they do is they might have the SEN students at the front of the class. Another, sometimes, obviously, it depends also how the class, where the tables and chairs are organized.
Roughly, how many? I know it's a bit of a broad question, and I guess it could range between different schools. But generally, or roughly, how many students are there, say, in a primary school with I don't know what the normal number is, about 300 students in a primary school, right? Something like that. What would be how many SEN students would each school have? Like a general state school.
A general state school, it obviously depends on the size of the school.
Okay.
So the bigger the school is, the more they can obviously facilitate for that particular child. Obviously, it could depend. It obviously depends, as I said, on the budget, number of staff, the size of the school.
The amount of staff they have to support the SEN students, right?
That's what it is, and obviously the school, if the school is going to take on, I don't know, let's just say 10 students, right? Let's just say 2 students are in year 3, 1 is in year 2, okay, and the others, for example, year 4, year 5, maybe in reception. Obviously, in reception, you will obviously perhaps require a little bit more. So that for example, that particular person who's helping that student, may require qualifications, may require certain years of experience, depending on the child's requirement, what the child needs, in order for the child or the school or the parents to say, my child is being supported, and yeah. The other thing was, I'm always giving the child, just to come back to your previous question, sorry, as to how the child can be supported, always for someone to be available to that child, irrespective of time, place, making sure that the child is always being supported. And as I said, in the class, outside class, in the playground, at lunchtime, regardless, the child needs that support. And coming back to this secondary school, again, budget, teachers, like support staff, sorry, and the size of the school.
Moving on slightly from that, a little bit away from the education sector itself, but is there a like correlation or link between, family dynamics and SEN students? Like, are there like there's problems at home? Does that lead to a higher chance of a student being having SEN? Or, is there any correlation between family dynamics and SEN students?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. So, for example, I'll give you one example. And I previously mentioned that student. She was in year 9 at the time, obviously, when I was her LSA, or her learning support assistant. Now she's in year 11. She had severe anxiety. She had ADHD. Believe me when I say she couldn't sit in one place for too long. She would constantly turn around. If her name, for example, her name was, I don't know, Rebecca. Rebecca, please turn around. Rebecca, please turn around. Rebecca, you're going to miss out on what Miss is saying, right? Rebecca, do you need you need to write down? Are you writing anything down? Because...
Yeah, can I just ask you something on the example you just gave? Just going back to one of the early things we are discussing, is that generally how teachers would deal with somebody? Like, I mean, I'm sure if they realize that a student is, constantly, surely they can't be just saying, or turn around, please.
Because what it is, sometimes what happens is SEN students, sometimes they don't like the support staff sitting next to them. So and obviously because it's the support staff and because the support staff knows the child, how the child operates, being firm, being fair, being just, obviously you can't be rude towards them, or you can't be harsh. Like, Rebecca, be quiet and turn around. It's not going to work. So obviously gentle approaches, Rebecca, come on, you're going to fall behind. And obviously those strategies do work from time to time. As I said, if they do feel sometimes overwhelmed, of course they can just take a little bit of a break. And with this situation, what happened was she had to drop off her brothers and sisters to school, and then she would come to work. So she had already a busy, so she's doing the job of a sister and in a way of a parent.
She's already exhausted by the time she comes in, isn't
She's already exhausted. So do you see? So that could happen sometimes and obviously because she's 14 or 15 years old, it's very difficult for her to manage all of that. So her whole environment.
Every day as well. She's doing it every day as well, isn't she?
She's doing it every day. She's doing it Monday to Friday, 5 days a week, and I think she had 3 or maybe 4 brothers and sisters there, and they were all in different years. I think one was in year 3, I think one was in year 4, and she's a 14-year-old. She's having to look after mom. Maybe dad's gone to work. Dad has an early shift, so, she's going from one place, then she's going to another place. She's going to school now. It's a total different, she has to adjust. But she's been already exhausted. She doesn't have that time. And that's where sometimes the challenges may, that's why, all these emotions, she's tired, she's exhausted, she hasn't had time to rest. She hasn't had time to sit down. She's from one primary school, she's coming to her own school. And that overwhelms, but you know what I'm talking about. Imagine if you and I, we had a busy morning, then we came back. How would you and I feel? We would want some rest. We would want some break. But because she doesn't get that, and that could sometimes overwhelm her, and it's sometimes, as he said, sometimes not all the time.
I once dropped off, my father was in hospital and it was raining a lot. So I thought, let me drop my little brother off to school, then I'll go to college. And it's in opposite direction. So I had to go 30 minutes with the train that way. Then I'd come back 30 minutes with the train, all the other way. And by the time I go into college, I was fully exhausted. And she's doing that every day. And she's suffering with those, difficulties. That is crazy.
So do you understand how she, and then on top
Yeah,
of that, can you see, so this is
yeah.
why it's also important that teachers, that the school, the teachers, the support
Provide the
staff,
correct support.
not just, but they need to understand the situation at home. This
I
is
think that's the
vital.
main thing. They must understand the situation. A lot of,
Definitely.
I see as well, and a lot of the teachers, they don't fully understand the situation a person's in, and that leads to them not being offered the correct support. So I think you're absolutely right in saying that the foundation is the understanding what the actual situation is. So as we start, reaching the end of the podcast, inshallah, I'm just gonna ask you a final question. What is your final message for parents who, because thing with a lot of parents is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they give up hope. If the child has SEN, they think he can't, become the solicitor or the lawyer or the doctor, or whatever the casual parent. What is the message for them? What would you tell a parent whose child has SEN?
I'm going to, this is obviously a question to you also, Brother Maheer, and to, have you ever noticed that parents spend most of the time, giving orders, go and read a book. Why are you here watching
Yes,
TV? Do
100%.
something, do that. You've seen this, right? Whether it's to SEN parents who have SEN children, or in general, when we say, now people obviously have a different understanding or different comprehension of what it means support. Support isn't isn't barking orders at your child who's perhaps 10 years old or 8 years old, whom is already anxious due to many reasons. Support is there. Support is, you are encouraging them. What does it mean by encouraging? As I said, not barking, not shouting orders at them. Instead of spending the whole day looking at your phone, why don't you read a book? Why don't you open and read a book? I'm not telling you to read, a Winnie the Pooh book with yourself. Read an adult book. Read a book. The child will say, "Oh, hang on a minute, Mum's reading a book. I'm going to read a book." That's what you call encouragement. That's motivation.
Example.
Do you understand what I'm saying? That is what you call encouragement and motivation. And then what you have, instead of putting a TV, why does a child need a TV in his or her room? Why? So instead of putting a TV, I am to all the parents, out there who are thinking, right, this person, is against what we're doing. Not at all. Not at all. That everyone has a right to enjoy watching movies and playing games. But the biggest, what we need to understand, not the biggest, sorry, my apologies. What we need to understand is, in order for our child, for our children, for any child to develop, the child needs to read. And the reading helps with the vocabulary. It becomes easier. And I'll tell you this, Brother Maheer, from experience. This was a year 7 student. She's in year 7. It's a simple question. The question is, use adjectives and metaphors to explain this quote. Simple question. Sir, I need help. Yes, what's the matter? Sir, I don't understand this question. Okay, what does the question say? Use metaphor. She doesn't know what a simile is. She doesn't know what a metaphor is. She doesn't know what an adjective is. She can't construct the sentence. Why? Because she's not reading. Instead of having a TV in her room or in his room, have one TV downstairs, have a PS5. You can even have the whole, get a PS4, get Xbox, whatever it is, have it there. Balance it out. Not as a reward, but okay, you know what? You've done reading. That's very good. And don't say you have to read for 1 hour. No. Okay. You start the reading. And the child will learn from you. Oh, dad's reading. Because I've noticed, and this is a very tragic incident that I saw once, the mother was more concerned about her phone than what happened to the child. Can you believe that? My phone nearly broke. Did you not see that? You can buy another. I'm sure EE will offer you another contract or another phone if you require one. But if something happens to your child, you're not going to get back that child. So we need to have a balance. We need to, in general, to everyone, to every parent out there. And I'm not, as I said, and I am not at all saying that a child should not have a mobile phone. A child should not, be permitted to watch movies, or a child should not be prohibited, from playing games. But you need to have a balance, because then they will themselves will say, "Oh, Mom, can you please? I would like to read this book," and it helps them develop. It makes life easier for them. And I'll just mention this incident to you. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a particular school. Obviously, due to the pandemic, the school provided laptops with everyone for every school. For every student. Chromebooks, nothing too expensive. Don't worry. It was Chromebooks. Now, the child who's in secondary school, who's in year 8, he was misusing the laptop or the Chromebook. How? He was on improper websites because there was no monitoring taking place at home. School has restrictions, of course, but again, that boundary, that balance. And obviously, I'm sure you'll agree with me, Brother Maheer, that as technology has increased, has advanced, so has a security business. So why are we not taking advantage of that? Okay, I'll give you another example. For example, the child, he doesn't like looking at, I don't know, a book. Get a Kindle or something like that and download the book, PDF or whatever you want to call it. So there are many ways.
Because I think what you're saying is that they've sort of, a kid isn't probably just going to open up, a big book and give it to them how they want it, basically. How they would, the kid isn't going to use the same system that you did 50 years ago when you were back in, just came to the country or something like that. No offense to anybody, what I'm saying, they're not going to use it. They might, they're going to see everyone using their iPads and stuff, so they might want to use one as well. So give it to them in their iPads or something like that. I totally agree with what you're saying.
No, of course. But you see, the thing is, the other thing I would like to add to what you said, which is you made that's, your point is true, is correct. If it's for reading, why does the child need an iPad? Why can the child not use a Kindle? So provide the child with the right equipment, not any equipment. You don't need to spend £300 on an iPad. Don't spend £300. Actually, it's not overspent. It's more like of a waste, if you understand what I'm saying. Because the child is supposed to be reading, but instead of reading, he's playing games. He's enjoying playing billiards, pool. Oh, are you reading? Yes, Mom, I'm on the 3rd chapter. Oh, great, well done. That's my boy. So structure, plan, and obviously, one thing is do not, and this to every single parent, I'm saying this, do not be rude or in any way, do not look down upon your child. Do not use, negativity towards your child, because it's going to be a huge, huge, huge barrier for their future. Use different approaches, different strategies. Okay, for example, let's just say the child's made a mess. Not mess, but the child, his toys are everywhere. Tidy that toys up right now. No, it's not going to work. Okay, come on, Sheila, or Emily, whatever name you wish to choose, or Emma. come, let's tidy up together. So do you see what happens? The child will walk, and he will take, for example, helping others, helping one another, motivation, encouragement. The moment parents do the action instead of commanding, there will be a day and night difference in the house.
One thing when I spoke to you the other day, one thing you said about when you're, I don't say not just parents, but figures of authority like parents, teachers, instead of just telling them, shouting at them to do it, make them understand why that's wrong. For example, if their toys are there, tell them, this is messy, it doesn't look nice, let's tidy it up. And instead of saying tidy it, that way the kid understands, okay, that's wrong, the house needs to look nice. I think that's another strategy to try and for parents and teachers and authority figures to use.
Of course. And the other thing is, explain to them, oh, look, if you leave it here, okay, and someone steps on it, what's going to happen? You also ask them the question, what's going to happen? Oh, he's going to say, oh, it's going to break. So what happens if it breaks? Oh, you won't be able to play. Would you be able to play with it? Oh, I won't be able to play with it. Oh, so what do we need to do to make sure that we can play with it again? We need to tidy up. So even giving them the opportunity to come up with the answers, you're building a relationship. Unfortunately, although there are many benefits to the technology world, as you can see, we're just sitting in our own homes. There are disadvantages that the relationship that should be there between parent and child, to a certain extent, and I'm not saying it's in all families. In some families, in some cases, is deteriorating slowly, and that we need to find ways, we need to find strategies as to how we can do. And there are many training programs. When I say training, but there are many opportunities for us to see how we can overcome these challenges with technology, and other areas.
We are going to stop here now, inshallah. Just before I do stop, I just want to say something that Brother Mu'tasim, he does have so Brother Mu'tasim, sorry, he does CVs. So his contact details are below. So if he has like extensive background in helping with CVs and things like that, and he's helping with my own one as well. And so he actually does them really well. He makes them look quite, posh. Well, not posh, but very prestigious, So his email will be in the description below. So please do contact him, and he'll be happy to provide you with his service. And also, Jazakallah khair for coming on today. You're very busy as well. So Jazakallah khair for taking your time and joining us to discuss this very important issue. And if you do have any questions regarding the topic that we spoke about, please do leave it in the description below. And Brother Mu'tasim has agreed that he will come back again, inshallah, one day in the near future to answer those questions. So we've already had a couple of questions come in, and inshallah, ask us those questions. Reach out to us on Instagram, social media, email, whatever, and we'll collate them, and Brother Mu'tasim will inshallah come back and help answer those questions as well. Jazakallah khair for your help, Brother Mu'tasim. If you'd like to say any final words or anything.
No, I look forward to the next meet where we do have where we'll obviously be answering your questions to the audience, and don't worry, you are not restricted to only one question. You can ask us many questions as you want, and we'll make it a limited special edition on that particular day or evening, whichever is obviously is possible. But as I said, obviously, Brother Maheer, Jazakallah khair for informing everyone that in terms of the CVs, and obviously you can my email is there, and you can also obviously contact me in regards to any other questions you have related to the topic. And even if it's something that even if it is with your own child, we will obviously, I'll be able to be help, and I'll try my best to help you, and I'll be at your service. Sometimes, obviously, it takes a little bit more time to produce an answer. Perhaps I may have to do extensive research before coming up with your answer. So please do bear patience with us, and may I take this opportunity to say Jazakallah to Brother Maheer for inviting me to your podcast.
Yeah, so Jazakallah khair for coming on, and we look forward to working with you in the future soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.